It's fair to say that sometimes things don't go exactly as planned, and I think today was one of those days. So the maiden to the FX-79 Buffalo did definitely not go as planned, and I'm not entirely sure why. So hence part of the reason for putting out this video, but I'll pretty much show the crash anyway. It's just one of those things. But let's take you through it and see if everybody else can work out what I'm doing wrong, because I'm not utterly sure about it. So at the start here, we've got my thrower Neil, or Crikey on YouTube. As you see, he's got the gauntlet of protection, which shouldn't be confused with a gardening glove that I just found in my shed at all. We went through, we checked our surfaces, we checked the motor, we looked at the centre of gravity according to the instructions. We had it slightly nose heavy, as we generally would do. And then we gave it a throw, and that's where it goes a bit pear-shaped.
Right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
You happy?
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you going to do? 50%?
I was going to give it full whack.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Ready?
Yeah, go. Oh!
Jesus.
What happened then?
When we first saw it back, we were thinking, oh, maybe we stalled it. What I didn't tell Neil is to give it quite a flat throw, as it's quite a big bird and it really needs to get some speed up. So he threw it at sort of 30, maybe 40 degrees. But if you look at the video, which I'll now attempt to slow down, he throws it, it levels out, it seems to carry its speed forwards, but then it absolutely plunges as if someone has just pressed the elevator full down and slams into the ground. In terms of my control input, the surfaces had a 50% dual rate. After watching the flight test episode about how much control surface was needed, I went with that to start with. I'd put in a tiny bit of input just to straighten up as we came to level, just to straighten the wings, and yeah, it all went crazy from that point. If you look at the Mobius here, you really don't get much of an impression, other than it went whack into the ground, which is great.
Yeah, go.
What I did notice, looking back on the DVR, which locked up after the crash, but I was lucky to retrieve it, several things. Firstly, you'll notice that the quality of the recording is very bad. I noticed this. I tested this before, hooking up a receiver to my TV, and everything was fine. But in this, it looked fuzzy, and looking again, I noticed that some of the OSD information has dropped off the bottom of the screen there, making me think there's some sort of mismatch between NTSC and PAL broadcast and receiving, so I will check that out. You'll also notice that the airspeed sensor seems to be not calibrated. It's coming up with over 200 kilometers an hour wind. It was windy. It wasn't that windy. But that shouldn't have had an impact because I was in manual all the way around. We tested stabilise on the ground to make sure it was okay, but only with the idea of doing that in the air after we had like several hundred meters of safety. So I'm not utterly sure what it was. I thought it might have been a stall, but it looks less likely. So answer on a postcard, please. Or you could just leave them in a YouTube comment as well.
Okay, so here's the damage report. This is pretty much how I found the plane back in the field. You notice every single thing that was stuck down seems to have burst forward and come off. I think what happened is the pretty heavy ESC, which was mounted over here on this Velcro, thumped off, hit into this that was attached there. That came out, pulled the back with it. Remarkably, the battery stayed intact there, which meant there wasn't much damage to the front here. Although what we did have is, you see there's a little bit of shearing, the plastic bit that was attached to this part of the pitot tube. has come off, so we'll have to see if that's fixable. The nose basically ripped out of its glue and came off. That's not such a bad thing. The Mobius mount here that was stuck on that came off of its mounting. No particular damage there. These side wings got a bit bent. The skew was nice and bent over, but that's not too bad. On the sides here, we got a bit of splitting through the tube, and you'll notice there's a rip out of this part of the wing where the other part of the wing attaches. Similar story on the other side. There's a split on that carbon fibre tube. This seems a little bit more intact, and that's because if we look at the wings, I see that the main part of the wing's fine. Where the bolt attached just here and went through into the main wing, that's the bit that basically ripped out with it, but that should just hopefully glue back. I think this is the one I replaced, which was Gorilla Glued, so that held the foam quite nicely, whereas the other one, which had the glue from the manufacturer, it's pretty much taken the wood out very cleanly, so it's not taken any wing with it, so that can just be glued back in. The only other part of damage was one of these clips. That one's intact. That one lost the front. This is where it clips onto this part of the carbon fibre spar that goes through. All in all, though, I've got to say I was surprised by the lack of damage on the nose. If we look at it, it's all intact. I can't see any real damage to the front here, and I don't know if it's because it basically turned itself over as it went, so it's sort of the top really took the impact, which is probably why the wings shook off. Really quite a different crash than I'm normal to. I'd expect. Normally the battery just smashes through the front. On this case, all the bits and pieces came flying through, but fortunately mainly intact. I'll go ahead and start gluing this back together now and then try and figure out what went wrong.